Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the meeting of council this evening, and welcome to those of you joining us from home via the live stream and in the public gallery. If you could take note of some housekeeping arrangements for this evening. If you wish to speak, please indicate that you wish to do so through myself or the Vice Chair, and please stand if you're able to when addressing the council. To enable your microphone, please press the middle button, which will turn green, and the microphone will light up red at the top. Please also remember to press the middle button when you have finished speaking. It's particularly important that all members use their microphones so that the audio can be picked up for the live stream. In the event of a fire alarm sounding during the meeting, please stand and follow the meeting administrator to the fire evacuation point outside the building. Also, for all members, as a reminder, with the council's camera and microphone tracking systems, it is possible that you can appear on camera at times, even though you may not be directly addressing the council. Please be mindful of this at all times and act appropriately, including use of mobile phones. Finally, you will have noticed that there is a timer on the screen. This is to indicate how much time you have left when asking and answering a question. I will indicate this evening when your time starts because I haven't got the button to press yet. I'm not allowed. Please ensure that your questions and answers are within the time frame. Do we have any apologies for this evening?
Thank you, Chair. Sorry, fallen at the first hurdle there. I've got apologies from Councillor Butell, Councillor Clark, Councillor Bywater and Councillor Welton.
Thank you very much. Our thought for the day this evening is offered to us by Mr. Phil Hayes.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Very interesting one, this. I was on my way to pick my daughter up from school 8 years ago now, and the heavens opened. Couldn't see where I was driving, probably should have pulled to one side, but we all push on through because we've got somewhere to be, something to do. And that was pretty much the last time I had a full body. My car was washed off the road, it aquaplaned, and it hit a small mound of earth on the side of the road. So instead of going into a ditch, it hit this little mound of earth that had been gouged away to create an entrance to the farmer's field. Unfortunately for me, my wheel hit this little mound of earth, and instead of tumbling and rolling and setting off airbags, it went up into the air and came down on the roof. And at that point, I heard cracking of metal, smashing of glass, and probably the most traumatic thing was just not knowing what was going to happen. I heard this almighty crack of the headrest snapping behind my ear. It was so loud. Unfortunately, it turned out that cracking was my neck breaking. I was hanging upside down. I couldn't move my arms, couldn't move my legs. Daughters are now doctors, but at the time, watching a lot of medical programs, I self-diagnosed, dangerous, Dr. Google. And I think the technical phrase was, I was knackered. I feared that my neck was broken, and clearly it was because my head was down here on my shoulders. And it was at that point that the most incredible team of experts leapt into assist. I was being followed by a bus, and the bus was probably about 50, 100 yards behind me and witnessed everything. They contacted the emergency services, and they in turn patched the call through because of the severity of my incident to Magpass Air Ambulance. Within literally minutes, Magpass were at the side of the road, and the doctor was there giving me hospital level treatment on the side of the road. And it was that treatment that saved my life. If it hadn't been for that, I would have been dead. And even had I survived, I wouldn't be able to stand here and talk to you. The incredible team at Magpass were able to patch me up and get me bundled into an ambulance. Some unkind friends would say I was too big to fit into the helicopter. I was told it was because it was too muddy to get across the field at the time. They got me to Addenbrooke's, where the neurosurgery team took over, and the incredible team at Addenbrooke's then patched me together, rebuilt my neck. I was so fortunate. They described the spinal cord to me as a 50-lane highway, and I'd closed 49 and a half lanes. So that half a lane meant that I still had hope and I still had faith. For 3 months, I was lying in the bed and quadriplegic. I couldn't move, and the neurosurgeon was saying the prognosis is not good. And I kept exercising. People said the bleeds on the brain really have affected you because you can't move your arms and legs. What exercise? And as you can tell, I don't really do a lot anyway. I kept exercising, and miraculously one morning I woke up and my arm moved, and then the next day my leg moved. So I stand here in front of you. I can't feel my arms from here down. They're still numb. I have a lot of people say how unlucky I have been, but I turn it on its head. So my thought for you today is always think what you have got and don't bemoan what you don't. So thank you, everybody. Thank you for your time, and have a good meeting.
That really gives us a little bit of spirit. And that's not the first time I've heard that story, and I've still got goosebumps. So thank you very much. Item number 2 on the agenda is minutes. Can we have agreement that I sign the minutes of the meeting of council held on the 22nd of February 23 as a correct record? Item 3, members' interest. Do we have any members who would like to declare any interest in relation to any agenda items this evening? No. Moving on to item 4, Chair and Vice Chair's engagements and announcements. To begin this agenda item, I would like to pay our respects to former councillor Alan McKendall-Lawrence, who sadly passed away on the 16th of March. Alan served 4 years as a district councillor representing the Huntingdon North Ward from 2011 to 2015, during the latter of which he served as vice chair and then chair of the council. He was also a member of council's development control panel and served briefly on the licensing committee and overview and scrutiny. I would like to ask members to please pay their respects by offering a minute's silence. Thank you, everyone. We will now hear some tributes, firstly from Councillor Sanderson.
Thank you very much, Chair. I knew Alan for many years, not only through this council, but also on Huntingdon Town Council, where he was mayor. Alan was a very community-minded person. He was always very affable, very friendly. His mother had been Mayor of Huntingdon, so I know that position meant an awful lot to him. And as you said, he was councillor for Huntingdon North Ward, which in those days included what is known as Oxmoor. So there's a lot of casework, a lot of things going on there, which Alan did he handled extremely well. He was always very accessible to people. I actually saw him only about a week before he passed away, and we had a really friendly chat, caught up on some of the old times. I know a lot of his work was involved with the voluntary sector, rehabilitating offenders as well. So I have nothing but fond memories of Alan, and I'll certainly miss bumping into him in town or on leisure, as we did occasionally, and having a good catch up with him. And I think all of us that knew him will miss him greatly. Thank you.
And also from Councillor McAdam.
Thank you. I haven't known Councillor Mackenzie Lawrence, or former councillor, for anything like as long as Tom. But I came on to Huntingdon District Town Council in 2015, and Alan was one of the first councillors I befriended. And what struck me about him was his passion, his determination to support those people he represented. And he was in many ways a good role model for new councillors, because it was obvious that he was there for the benefit of the whole community, and particularly those he more directly represented. So I just feel that his loss is very sad, and I know he definitely will be missed. So thank you.
Thank you very much. If you'd like to turn to page 23 of your agenda pack, you will see... Oh, yep, sorry.
Sorry, thank you, Chair. Just on behalf, Alan represented this group in this council for 4 years. So if I might just add a tribute on behalf of my group to Alan, and both what Tom and Steve have said absolutely encapsulates the Alan that I remember. He was one of those people that are constantly sort of popping up in places, and that's always a good trait in a councillor, I think. That whenever I went to Huntingdon, it seemed that Alan Mackenzie Lawrence was kind of there, and you could scarcely move down some ends of the high street without sort of running into him one way or the other. So whilst he wasn't a councillor in this forum for very long, and Chair, it's slightly sort of worrying that you say that he left in 2015, because it seems like only a couple of years ago. So it just shows how time speeds up. We do thank him for his service to this council. He loved the civic side of it. He was kind of made for some of that stuff, and it was a real shame, democracy notwithstanding, that he was unable to complete his 2 years as chair by losing his seat at the end. But we want to say a huge thank you to Alan for his service, and pass on our commiserations to his family.
Try again, there we go. So page 23, you will see a list of engagements that have been attended. Item 5, notices of motion. I will now ask Councillor West to move his motion on London Luton Airport, and I will then follow that with opening the debate. Would you like to turn your microphone on?
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you, members. Good evening, members. You noticed, as the Chairman has said, that item 5, I'd like to move the following motion.
I'm not sure I understand. Is there something else I can help with?
I've got friends everywhere. They pop up and I don't want to see them. Well, I don't want them. They come. How do I shut him off? Sorry, Chairman, I do apologise, but I think everybody knows that this electronic maze is not my strong point. The motion to council, can I just say a few opening words, the reason what prompted me to do it? Chairman, this is not about playing politics, hoping for support across the chamber. It's about a duty of care for our residents. On the record is details of discussions at scrutiny. The consultation during the COVID pandemic gave clear impression it was to create a stacking area, allowing for space to become available for aircraft to land safely at London Luton Airport. I'm sure members agree safety is so important, and airspace with military bases in the area is at a premium. Data collected by the National Air Traffic Service and detailed data collected by an Abbotsleigh resident meeting the standards required by the industry regarding the recent flight path changes at London Luton Airport notes the increased noise and pollution experienced by Huntingdonshire residents caused by descending aircraft. Urges London Luton Airport to abandon its recent flight path changes which have led to additional aircraft mileage above Royal Huntingdonshire communities, and requests that the leadership write to Civil Aviation Authority as part of their post-implementation review of flight path changes. Chairman, I think I'd like to say to members that I believe that we were given the impression, the strong impression at scrutiny, that the planes would fly at 8,000 feet. We said, well, could it not be 9? Oh, yes. We had a distinct impression they would fly, if I can use this as an aircraft, Chairman, they would fly around in the stacking area, wait until there was space at Luton Airport, then they would fly to the airport. But it appears they do a little loop, which is extra mileage, which I would have thought we could well do without in the present climate situation. They do a little loop, come back, then they go over Abbotsleigh at 5,000 feet, apply their air brakes because they need to get the right altitude or height to get into Luton, which has got short runways, so they need to get in the right position to fly into the airport and then obviously stop before they reach the point of the runway. Chairman, at no time during discussions I'm certain from what I've read on the, looking back, what I've read, no way we were told that all the aircraft that visit Luton, visit and come out of Luton would be going across Abbotsleigh at 5,000 feet. And the air brake noise is really unpleasant. So, Chairman, I do think that we were misled. And I think the agenda is reasonable and balanced. Chairman, may I conclude, time is pushing on, may I conclude expressing my sincere thanks to Councillor Ferguson, chairing the public meetings, which have been constructive, working together with South Cambridgeshire District Council, Cabinet Member Councillor Hawkins, and the local Huntingdon MP, Right Honourable Jonathan Ginodley, and South Cambridgeshire MP, Right Honourable Anthony Brown, who have been supportive and understand the situation, and have had meetings with the Aviation Minister, Right Honourable Robert Court. If I can leave it there, Chairman. Thank you. Do you wish a seconder?
There we go. Thank you very much. I think you should speak at every meeting because everyone smiled. Do we have a seconder for that motion? Councillor Gardner.
Yes, Chairman. Do you want me to speak now or at the end of the... Okay.
Councillor Ferguson, would you like to now provide a response?
Good morning. Thank you, Chair. Firstly, through you, Chair, I'd like to thank my friend, Councillor West, for bringing this important motion to Council today. Councillor West and I spend many evenings together in drafty village halls, listening to complaints from parishes, the parishes that we represent, about the perceived noise impact of the Luton Airport arrival flight path. In fact, in many weeks, I spend more time with Councillor West than I do with my wife. I'm not complaining. Councillor West and I have together received thousands of noise complaints by residents of our rural villages of Abbotsleigh, Worsley, the Gransdons, Toseland and Yelling, and across for the whole of southern Cambridgeshire, many of whom complain about having their rural tranquillity shattered by up to 40 Luton flights a day, many of which are deploying air brakes that result in a peculiar and piercing screeching noise that causes distress amongst residents used to tranquil surroundings. As Councillor West just mentioned, we've held 2 public meetings along with our friends in South Cambs and members of the RELAS campaign group, and at each meeting over 150 residents turned up, with many more watching online. We've also had excellent support from both Jonathan Ginugli MP and Anthony Brown MP, both of whom share our concerns. Now, as Councillor West just said, the real problem here is that these residents, many of whom moved to Huntingdonshire for the tranquility of its rural setting, were never consulted about these changes, because the CAA has arbitrarily decided that noise is not an issue for aircraft flying above 7,000 feet, which means that if an aircraft flies at 699 feet above your village, you can complain about noise, but if it flies at 7,001 feet, you cannot. This means that nobody in Huntingdonshire had any real say in these changes, although many thousands of residents expressed their concerns through the any other comments box in the consultation. And as Councillor West just said, that consultation exercise was carried out during COVID with no real in-person engagements with residents or parish councils. I'm an aero engineer by profession, and I have 30 years working in that industry. And when I read the consultation, I was also bamboozled by it. I expected it to be for a stack over Gratham and not for aircraft to take a shortcut across the villages we represent. For those of you in the south of the district who are not currently affected by resident complaints of noise, I urge some caution. Luton has recently announced plans to expand the air traffic into their airport from 18 million flights a year to 18 million passengers a year to 32 million passengers a year, almost doubling the number of flights, and perhaps eventually resulting in the use of the stacking system that they currently do not use. However, and through you, Chair, with apologies to Councillor West, although I support the spirit of this motion, cannot for technicality vote in favour of it, because I cannot support the wording of all of the motion, because I am the Executive Councillor for Environmental Health, and therefore I'm responsible for noise. However, this is a technical point, and although I will not be supporting the motion directly, I urge my colleagues in the Joint Administration and across the floor to vote in favour of it in solidarity with the rural communities in the south of the district. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. Now going to open up the debate. Firstly, Councillor Davenport-Ray.
First, I wanted to thank Councillor West for alerting me about this motion in advance. It gave me some time to think about it, and I will be supporting it this evening. As the ward councillor for the neighbouring ward, it's clear how much effect this has had on local residents, on the quality of their life and the quality of the life of their livestock. And so it's important to me, and I hope my colleagues will consider supporting it as well.
Thank you. Councillor Orban.
Thank you, Chair. As well as cross-party support, I can give cross-geographical support as one of the councillors for the most northern part of the district. I was on the scrutiny panel when the CAA, Civil Aviation Authority, came and presented, and I say I was on the panel, it was a virtual meeting, it was during lockdown, and I can remember distinctly sitting there. I can't remember all the details, but my abiding memory is one of the CAA, one of whom was former councillor Derek Giles, and you can imagine how vexed Derek got and how strongly he felt and represented the area most obviously affected. And the CAA, my abiding impression is, don't worry, it's not a problem. It's all going to be so high up, you're not going to be bothered by it. That's my impression. But from what Councillor West has said, and Councillor Ferguson has said, and Councillor Davenport-Ray has said, what the CAA promised or intimated isn't happening, and it is a real problem. And I urge our colleagues across the chamber to support this motion.
Thank you. Councillor Corley.
Here we go. Thank you, Chair. As one of those councillors who represents villages in the south of the district that hasn't been affected as yet, we're very aware of the proposed increase. And although air traffic represents only about 2 to 3% of global CO2 emissions, still planes, we all know, remain amongst the most polluting means of transport. On average, 10 to 15 times more polluting than trains, and on average 5 to 10 times more polluting than the buses. Environmentally speaking, the growth of air transport is not desirable, and it's certainly not desirable in this area. And as a council that's committed to become a net zero council in its own operations, as well as an agent for change for other organisations and influencing others, I would encourage us all to support this motion. If we're to be taken seriously in our commitments, as well as protecting the residents of Huntingdonshire from the negative effects of pollution, both and noise. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I will be supporting this motion. I congratulate Councillor West and Councillor Ferguson on working together to bring this about. I was particularly impressed with Councillor West's demonstration of flight paths earlier. I thought that was very good. And all those evenings spent in drafty village halls with Councillor Ferguson have clearly paid off. But on a serious point, I do find the attitude of the Civil Aviation Authority, CAA, concerning. They seem like a typical central government agency. They're perhaps not in tune with the views of local residents. And if they think that flying at 7,000 feet won't cause a disturbance to people on the ground, then I would suggest they need to look at those facts again. So I'm all in favour of doing this, particularly concerning to people in the south of the district. But I imagine that will potentially have, from what Councillor West was saying, an impact on people elsewhere in our district. So I hope the members will get behind this proposal. Thank you.
Thank you. Any further comments? No? Councillor West, did you want to reply to any of those comments before we move?
No, I just thank colleagues for their comments.
Well, Councillor Gardner first, and then we'll come back to you, Councillor West.
Thank you, Chair. I will be brief, because you don't want to end up listening to me all night. I'm asking the Council to support this motion because the Civil Aviation Authority has abandoned what it said it would do at the consultation meeting that I attended with Councillor Alban during lockdown. And I can definitely remember them saying that planes would be at 8,000 feet within the stacking area, which would be centred over Grafham Water. They then agreed that they would raise the level of that stacking area due to complaints by councillors in this chamber to say, you know, we think it should be 9,000. They agreed to that principle. They stated to us that the planes would then fly at 9,000 feet to just past where the Black Cat roundabout is, and from that level, at 9,000 feet above the Black Cat roundabout, they would then reduce down into London Luton. So therefore, that would have mitigated some of the noise. So I am in full support of Councillor West and Councillor Ferguson's thoughts on this, and I would urge all members to support the motion.
Thank you. Councillor West.
Chairman, just to thank members for their comments. They really are appreciated. Off the record, can I say I'm a tiny bit disappointed their equipment didn't speak to them. I didn't get a little voice.
We'll try harder. Okay, so I will just confirm the content of the motion and then we will take a vote. So it is for the Council to note the data collected by the National Air Traffic Service regarding the recent flight path changes at London Luton Airport. Also note the increased noise and pollution experienced by Huntingdonshire residents caused by descending aircraft. It urges London Luton Airport to abandon its recent flight path changes which have led to the additional aircraft mileage above rural Huntingdonshire communities, and also requests that the leadership write to the Civil Aviation Authority as part of their post-implementation review of flight path changes. Can I have a show of hands for those in favour, please? Do we have anyone against? And anyone abstaining? Thank you very much. Item number 6, questions by members of the public. In accordance with Council Procedure Rule 10.1, I understand that no public questions have been submitted in advance, and therefore we will now move on to the next agenda item, which is item 7, questions to members of the Cabinet. Moving on to this item, so councillors can ask questions of members of the Cabinet, and can I just take this opportunity to remind you that all questions and answers must be relevant to matters for which the Council has powers or duties, must not relate to an item which is included elsewhere on the agenda, since these can be raised at this point in the meeting, should be limited to obtaining information or pressing for action, and must not divulge or require to be divulged confidential or exempt information. I must also stress that any questions and answers must not exceed 2 minutes in duration. I would also like to remind you that if you would like to ask a supplementary question, please ensure that these are raised through myself and not directly to the Executive Councillor. I will now open the floor to questions. Councillor Alban.
Thank you, Chair. My question is to Councillor Sanderson, who has been given advance notice of this question, and I'm grateful for his prompt response to my email. Just a bit of background, I don't want to turn this into a ward surgery, but Stilton has planning permission for 70 houses on a site at the south of the village, and which was bought by Cross Keys Housing Association. They then added a further 16 houses onto that site, but nothing has happened. In the village of Home, there's a rural exception site which was granted on an agricultural piece of land. Crops were planted, and although progress is going on, getting things sorted out, still nothing has been built, no one is being housed. So it occurred to me that if that's happening in my ward, or mine and Councillor Butel's ward, there might be other members affected and other wards affected. So my question to Councillor Sanderson is this, and he's agreed to provide a written answer in due course. Please would he confirm the following in regard to sites in the Huntingdonshire District Council area which benefit from planning permission for housing development, those which are in the ownership of a housing association or one of their associated or subsidiary companies, where A, no construction work has started at all, and B, where construction work has started but there remain homes unbuilt, and those where planning permission was granted as a rural exception site, and where A, no construction work has started, and B, where construction work has started but there remain homes unbuilt. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Sanderson, your time starts now.
Thank you. Is this the countdown clock? Thank you. I'm honoured to be the first subject to this time limit. I better get on with it. Thank you to Councillor Alban for his question. I know how hard he works for people in Stilton. So part of the difficulty with this is we can only search planning applications by name of applicant. So we can't necessarily do that by registered provider. So we need to go through each of those in turn to work out who was applying for planning permission where. I've spoken to Pam Scott at Strategic Housing. They don't hold the information in quite the way that Councillor Alban's asked for, and it will require a little bit of more work to put something together. A lot of applications are also through agents, so we'll need to cross-reference those. But what I will do is I will follow up and give Councillor Alban a more detailed response. Thank you.
Yes, of course.
Would it help if members provided Councillor Sanderson with sites in their ward that they're concerned about, that there may be other people waiting for housing? One of the things with housing is with applications like this, I argued against the site, but my next priority once it was passed was to get people housed, and I know there are people housed on waiting in my ward and probably other wards as well that are waiting for housing, and particularly those who want to get on the property ladder on the part built, part rent, part buy. This is their opportunity, and my concern is housing associations are over-promising and under-delivering.
Thank you. Councillor West.
Sorry, Chair, I was going to answer the supplementary. Is that in order? I think this is one for our housing strategy, which will be drawing up quite soon. But I appreciate the supplementary question, and certainly happy to hear from members if they have the same experience. Thanks.
Councillor West.
Chairman, this is a question for Councillor Taylor. Councillor Taylor, what's prompted this question is, will you carry on with the present policies of operations and build on the fine work of Councillor Butel, who was your predecessor? What prompted it, Chairman, was the performance update snapshot operations. In the month of January, Chairman, when it was cold, wet in hospital, in human terms, the district missed less than 1 bill in 2000. I think that's a wonderful achievement, particularly a hostile time of the year when it's dark and cold and so forth. So great credit to the crews. Also, Chairman, what thrilled me as well is the continued push on contamination rates means more material being recycled than landfilled, and at the same time generating more income to fund vital services. And also the street cleansing, a 98% success. I think that's something, Chairman, which I think the staff and Councillor Taylor deserve credit for. So I think I'm asking a question of Councillor Taylor. Has this been successful? Will you carry on with the same policies that you are or have done over the last 10 months, which your predecessor followed? Thank you, Chairman. Put this up.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Councillor West. There is an old saying: if it ain't broke, you know the ending. No, absolutely. There's no reason why we shouldn't carry on like this, and absolutely, why not strive for even better? The operation team are fantastic. Every time I go to Eastfield House and speak to them, they are amazing. They do a fantastic job, and yeah, absolutely, we'll carry on as my predecessor, Marge, and we'll carry on. And there is no reason to change something that isn't broke. But as I said, we will strive to get better. Thank you, Councillor West. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Corley.
Thank you, Chair. My question is for Councillor Sanderson, and I have provided him with the details beforehand. So there are two planning applications relating to Little America industrial site in Great Staughton within my ward. One of them was lodged in April 2021, seeking permission to erect 8 small business units to be used for industrial purposes. The second was lodged almost a year later in April 2022 for the same site, seeking lawful development certificate for use as a car repair workshop. Both of these planning applications remain pending decision, and one for nearly 2 years and the other for nearly a year, much to the consternation of the residents that I represent. We hear from Councillor Sanderson that the backlog is being cleared. I'd like to ask him if he can tell me when the residents of Great Staughton, and particularly Staughton Moor, can expect a decision on both of these applications. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Well, I can't give a specific date or time when the applications in question will be determined, but what I can say is I think this is a legacy of the backlog we've had started in 2020-21. We are making some improvements on that. In fact, our backlog is down by 28%, I can confirm. As to these specific applications, they were reassigned to a case officer in January. The case officer is in dialogue with the applicants to bring this to a conclusion. In the case of the certificate of lawful use, we're working with 3Cs Legal, as there are some legal complications with that. I will go back to Councillor Corley with some more specific detail when I've had a chance to speak to the case officer concerned. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Shaw.
Thank you, Chairman. My question is for Councillor Taylor as portfolio holder for open spaces. I was pleased to see that the climate strategy was passed at the last council meeting, and in that strategy the council committed to planting more trees and rewilding our land. Can you tell me what the progress has been made so far this year to achieve that goal?
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Councillor Shaw. And I thank you for emailing your question to me in advance as well, because that's enabled me to get some data for you all. And I'm conscious of the time, so I will get on with it. So, the targets on our tree planting, excuse me, just getting over COVID, so bear with me. Sorry, I'm clear. I am negative. Just throw that one in. Anyway, so yeah, our tree planting targets are 67 standard. So what we class as standard are 2 to 4 metre high trees, and target on whips are 400. That's 30 centimetres high. So we've achieved so far 151 standard trees, so they're our bigger ones, and 150 whips planted, so we've exceeded our targets. Within these targets, 114 purple leaf plum trees have been planted at the Oxmoor Lane here in Huntingdon. This project actually is known as Chudley Bloom in HDC, so if you hadn't guessed, that is after actually one of our officers in operations. The plum trees are now in bloom, as well as the crocuses and the daffodils, which have been planted in between the trees. Myself and Councillor Davenport-Ray, we actually went there and did a bit of help. Well, we tried to help, didn't we? We looked like we were helping. So they are beautiful now. It's on social media. Have a look. We've got the crocuses out. The colours are absolutely marvellous. Also, when the plums come into season, the residents are more than welcome to harvest them. So that's really good.
Thank you.
I've gone over time. But I also just
I'll give you 10 seconds because you're getting over COVID, you've got 10 seconds.
Thank you. So all I want to tell you is as well that there are other carbon sinks happening in the district. Biodiversity for All, which will see HDC engaging with the community for faster and more direct action on our own land and pilot projects with the council. So we're going to be letting the grass grow, but cutting paths through, floral meadow
That's
projects
15.
and rewilding. Thank you.
Thank you. Can someone buy this lady a watch? Councillor Gleadow.
Thank you, pardon.
We'll get there in the end. Thank you. It's a question, sorry, for Councillor Sanderson. I hate to ask this, but like everyone else, obviously I get queries concerning planning applications and obviously issues on enforcement. And I was wondering if Councillor Sanderson could give me an update on where we actually are with that.
Thank you. Yes, thank you for the question, Councillor Gleadow. Thank you, Chair. So what I can advise is that we have currently 224 planning applications over 26 weeks for determination. That's down by 88 since the last data collection. That's a decrease of 28%. In terms of planning enforcement, we have 663 active enforcement cases. In 2019, we actually had over 1,400. So I'm very pleased with the work that the team are doing. I think it's moving in the right direction. We now have a new business manager in the development management section. We still have a long way to go, but I think we're certainly showing considerable signs of improvement. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Tevlin.
Hello, thank you, Chair. So this question is for Councillor Davenport-Ray. How does this council plan to support local people in the transition to electric vehicles? Thank you.
Thank you for the question. First of all, I think it's important for us to recognize the scope of our council's role in the transition away from internal combustion. HDC has important roles to play in enabling and encouraging this transition. However, the funding is likely to come from other levels of government, especially the combined authority. Council officers and I, however, will remain vigilant to opportunities that arise to fund EV charging and encourage local people and businesses to take up that funding. And there are a couple of recent developments in this area. Council officers are nearing completion of a behavior survey of our car park users. Do they want more charging? If so, what type? What competition will we likely encounter in a charging market in the medium term? And the results of this work will come to the ONS Climate Working Group soon. ONS this month also received an update on the UK Shared Prosperity Fund, and some of the rural fund within that will be considered for a scheme to support EV capacity building and infrastructure support for local community groups. But this work is at a very early stage, and we still need to seek the input from parish councils and other stakeholders. The Combined Authority has also recently completed their public survey on alternative fuels, which confusingly includes electric vehicles. But this showed strong public support for moving away from fossil fuels. but the number of public charging points lagging behind. And the combined authority has been awarded about £88,000 from central government, which they will be using to create a rolling annual delivery plan for public EV charging. But of course, none of this work matters if the National Grid has no capacity to supply EV charging. So over the past few months, officers and I have met with UK Power Networks. And it's important that an open relationship with them and that they know about our ambitions, because that will inform their infrastructure investments. And this also links directly into our work with partners across the county to create a local area energy plan for Cambridgeshire. This higher level piece will provide the evidence necessary to rationalize more investment in the grid in our region. But it's also important for me to challenge some of the assumptions around EVs. As a society, we will have to consider unfamiliar.
I'm going to have to cut you off.
Okay. Talk to me if you want to know more.
Councillor Niche.
Thank you, Chair. I have two questions, but they're for different people. So, and I get two. Anyway, I'm going to go and move on quickly now. First of all, it's apologies to Councillor Ferguson and Councillor Hassel, because I'm going to ask Councillor Taylor another question. So, it's a brief one. It's on the booking system for One Leisure. It's, as you might notice, I'm a frequent visitor to One Leisure, or not, but I'm reliably informed that it's quite a complex system for booking, in the fact that beneficially, all the classes in wide range of areas apparently are quite full. But those people that book them don't necessarily turn up, which means actually the actual classes themselves can be quite small. But it means those people that want to book it can't, because it's already been booked by members who don't have to pay. Then they don't turn up, they still don't have to pay. So I just wondered if it's something that could be looked at as to how can people book the system without having to get up. My understanding is at 6 o'clock in the morning to try and get on and find they're already taken. I don't rise that early, so I'm always missing. I'm always missing those applications. So it's just a question of whether it's something that could be looked into, because it does seem to be creating quite a problem, specifically in my ward. And I'm sure I'm not individual. It happens around the way. So thank you,
Councillor Taylor.
I think that's on. Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I mean, the booking system itself, when you use the app, is pretty straightforward. But I hear what you're saying. If people are not, and there is on the app an area where you can cancel, but if people are not doing that, then yes, this is where the problem sits. So I am really, really happy. I'm meeting with Head of Leisure Friday, so I will take that to the Head of Leisure and we'll speak about that. But that is a really good point, and we need our residents, our members of the One Leisure, to be able to use it. And if we've not got the spaces because people are not cancelling, it's just not fair on other members, especially when they're paying membership. So thank you for that.
Second question.
Thank you. This is the second one, not to come. My second one is a very brief one again for Councillor Sanderson, in that going back, and you'll be surprised, it's through planning. Nothing too complex. So it's just really if we could have an answer at some stage as to when the training is likely to be rolled out to towns and parishes. We were fortunate enough to have a training on enforcement, but if you go back when you first moved into your role, we talked about, I know I was talking about, we were going to have last July, we were looking at training for town and parish councillors, and now we're another year on and we still haven't got that out yet. I think it's really important because as we see coming through DMC sometimes, that the lack of understanding creates that block sometimes at DMC as well. So I just wonder if you could update us on when you're likely to put towns and parish councils for training for.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Councillor Niche, for the question. Councillor Niche is correct. I think it's time we did offer training to our town and parish council colleagues. I think generally they present extremely well when they come to DMC, but there are problems occasionally. We did, as Councillor Niche correctly said, on Monday we had training for DM members on planning enforcement. We'll be rolling that out in the coming months to other members, and then we'll be wrapping that up in a full training session for parish councils. I will get a date confirmed. I expect it will be probably later in the summer, hopefully before the summer holidays for schools, so we can get as many people present as possible.
Thank you. Councillor Lowe.
Thank you, Chair. This is for Councillor Davenport-Ray. Apologies for not giving you a heads up on this one. Following a recent report on Sky News about the loss of 80% of the trees planted along the new A14 and the recent announcement of Huntingdonshire's climate emergency, what are the council doing to put pressure on highways to replant the trees in Huntingdonshire at their cost and not the suggested £2 million of taxpayers' money?
Councillor Davenport-Ray.
Yeah, I can give you a little bit of an update. So first of all, why did the trees fail? That was the first thing I began to investigate when this story became clear. And some of this actually has to do with the soil rather than taking care of the trees. So when the trees started to fail, there were many soil samples taken, and it was clear that they were nutrient deficient. And so why was that? Well, National Highways recently launched an initiative where they do not import topsoil. They don't move it between sites. And there are reasonable reasons for doing that. But this means that they store all the soil on site and then move it about and use it throughout the scheme. That works well when you have slopes of less than 10 degrees. But when you're building a highway and you have embankments and cuttings that are much steeper, unfortunately, lots of soil was used that had clay in it, quite a lot of clay. And so it won't be a surprise for when you drive past all these sites that most of them are Scots pines that have survived, because that would survive in that environment. So a survey has been done of all the trees that have died. It was done before the drought of 2022, so I expect the number to increase greatly by the time replanting begins. But replanting will begin in October 2023. Not only just replanting of trees, but use of different types of tree guards rather than just plastic, a mixture of wool, cardboard, and biodegradable plastic. In terms of the funding behind it, I will have to look into that part a bit further, but I will certainly go away and write back to you on that.
Any further questions before we move on? No. Okay. Moving on to item 8, the Huntingdonshire Place Strategy. This is beginning on page 25 within your agenda packs. Our Executive Leader, Councillor Conboy, will present the Huntingdonshire Place Strategy, Huntingdonshire Futures, and propose the recommendation contained in the report, along with a brief update on the deliberations of the Cabinet at their meeting on the 21st of March.
I've just apologised to Mr Fox because I'm going to have my back to him slightly and some of my other colleagues. Apologies. I've got angst, Chair, that we haven't got a countdown clock for me. And I think I've got 45 minutes. And if you think I'm on my feet for 45 minutes, it will be much shorter. It is a real privilege to stand before you today. When I came to this chamber this time last year, this was something that was already going to be in train. I have to say I'm not sure I knew much about it. I do remember asking our officer, Kate McFarlane, several times to explain to me yet again what it was, because I thought I understood it and then it moved again and I wasn't quite sure I understood it. I have to say, what a journey we have been on over the last 12 months. Although this is being presented to you here tonight as Huntingdonshire's Place Future, please remember it is not our strategy, it is Huntingdonshire's strategy. And our role in this is around facilitation, enabling, influencing, as well as some of the traditional doing. And so what you have before you tonight is a piece of work around which there has been extensive engagement. Now, only this afternoon, somebody complained that we hadn't personally phoned them up and had a conversation. We'd had a conversation with their overarching organisation, but we haven't spoken to every single resident. And that's because it's an ongoing piece of work. This is a 20 to 30 year strategy. And we have only just started. We've scratched the scratch of the scratch. We are right at the beginning. And what is ahead of us is hugely significant, but it will evolve, it will grow, and it will change as we work with our partners to deliver it. And as our residents' aspirations for the future grow and change. So this is where I get to do my bit where I say, next slide, please. And I'm hoping that somebody will, oh, look, that's magic, isn't it? So just a reminder, many of you have seen this many times, but we've done a significant amount of engagement already. We've done some things we haven't traditionally done as a council. And now that we've tried it, we've got quite excited about the possibilities it brings. We've popped up at places. Traditionally, as an organisation, I think we think that we should lay everything on, but in fact, we've popped up at other people's events. We've turned up in marketplaces, we've popped up where people are busy doing other activities, and we've talked to them about their aspirations for the place that they live in. We've talked to businesses, we've talked to our education providers, we've talked to young people. We've talked to people on benches when they least suspected somebody was going to sit down next to them and ask them what they thought about Huntingdonshire. They have given us some fantastically honest feedback, but they haven't been limited by the traditional things that limit all of us. They've stayed in what I keep calling the art of the possible. We keep saying, don't tell me it's difficult. Let's not be constrained by money and time. Those are real practical challenges, but let's talk about what could be possible. If we could do things differently, better, if we could achieve the things that you would like to see happen in Huntingdonshire, what would they be? So this gives you a sense of the range of engagement, but it's by no means completed. And if you can do the next slide, please. Now, you'll be pleased to know I'm not going through the entire slide pack that you've got in your papers, but it was just really to remind you that as part of this and as part of that engagement, we got lots of feedback. And working with our professional facilitators, they helped to shape that into a number of pathways, a number of journeys that articulated those visions. And the real challenge for us now is to go on those journeys with our communities and to test out some of those ideas. And some will be exactly the right thing right now that we need. And some things won't be quite right yet. And some things are probably not even in those coloured arrows. There will be some things we haven't yet second-guessed because it's an emerging picture. But of those journeys, we are talking about pride in place, environmental innovation, an inclusive economy, health embedded, and travel transformed. And in a minute, when I talk to you about the corporate plan, you'll see the read-through between the long-term ambitions and strategic direction and some of the things we will do in our immediate future. Councillors, many of you were in this room at the workshops. I don't think I've ever seen councillors quite so animated outside of normal council meetings. People have post-it notes and pens, and we're kind of going, and what if we did? And could we? And that will never work in Ramsey because the roads are really difficult. And then we got all excited about bus hubs and buses you could put your pram on in a way that we don't quite have now. And what if you could do places where you turned up and you could put your bike on at one end and you could get your bike off the other end in a way we don't yet do? And we got excited about the art of the possible. So we have 20 pathways in all. Some will run fast. Some, I suspect, will be slower. But the power of doing this piece of work has already been seen. I got a funny phone call from a parish. Would you come and talk to us because you said at the place strategy workshops that you really wanted to hear our ideas? So I phoned them up and said, I'd love to come and talk to you. And they said, oh, we didn't expect you to actually come. But we did. And I have to tell you, Councillor Gardner and I had a fascinating conversation with this particular parish council. I'm not going to embarrass them tonight, but my goodness. They said, well, if you can have a forward-looking plan, we can have one too. And then they proceeded to share with us all of their ideas about what would make their community better. Some of them resonated with the things in this strategy. Some things were very, very particular to that location. Some were really easily achievable. Some it's going to be a bit more complex, but they've got Councillor Gardner and I've offered to help, and the answer is, I'm sure there's a will, so I'm sure there's a way. But it was actually seeing this in practice. And then just this week, I had a different conversation with some of the people who had been at those workshops, and I found them playing back to me some of the very things that our residents, our businesses, and you had been saying at those workshops, because they were meaningful. So, tonight you're being asked to approve the place strategy, bearing in mind it's not ours, but it is a statement of intent. But this will then be the start of the journey, because then from this comes more work, more conversations, more listening. But the clever bit here is working with our partner organisations too, because some of the aspirations we will never be able to do from this organisation alone. We either don't have the legal powers, we don't have the clout in some instances, and in some instances we just don't have the cash. But we have a will and we want to see it work. But there are other partners who have the legal powers. There are other pots of money. And if we work together and work smart across the system, we can actually be quite powerful for the things our residents would want. But it's also working with our businesses that will innovate, that will find creative solutions, and it's working with our communities who themselves are getting excited about what if. And people are talking about all sorts of projects, from the very small to the very, very large. So the only thing that you need to worry about tonight is you need to hold onto your hat, because when you vote it through tonight, and I really hope you will, this is the start of the journey. And I am looking forward to future administrations being able to come back. We will come back year on year, but I'm looking forward to future administrations coming back and saying, we started the journey in 2023. This is where we are 5 years on, 10 years, 15, 20, and this is not just about our current residents, this is about our youngsters who will be our older residents in the future. So I'm very happy to take questions, I'm very happy to take comments, but I'm sorry I didn't keep you for 45 minutes on the presentation.
Thank you very much. So we've heard the recommendation. Do we have a seconder for this, please? Councillor Sanderson, thank you very much. I will now open up for debate on this, and Councillor Hunt.
Thank you very much, Chair. So, to be straight from the start, this is a strategy that makes me look forward to the future. I remember coming to a members' engagement session earlier this year, where we were given a sneak preview of the strategy, and I will confess I was one of those councillors Councillor Combo mentioned, running around frantically with post-it notes and pens, sticking it on everything. And as soon as I saw that strategy, I immediately saw a Huntingdonshire that I want to live in, work in, and grow old in. As a young person who's lived in this district my entire life, I'm well aware of the challenges that we currently face. Growing up, just to pick a few issues, over-reliance on cars, lack of local opportunities, and struggling high streets have been barriers that I've faced growing up. And it's refreshing to see not only these challenges acknowledged, but a real desire to tackle these issues head on and to go back to the art of the possible, see what we could do going forward. I'd like to thank the team behind this for all of their work, including the outreach work with all of the young people I've spoken to, which has been a refreshing amount of engagement compared to a lot of other things I've seen, both within local government and outside local government. And just to pick some things I'm excited about, the idea of a Youth Climate Council, I'm more than happy to pledge my support however that's possible. I mean, the next step is to get going and start building the Huntingdonshire of tomorrow, and I urge everyone in this chamber to support this strategy. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Hunt. We didn't rehearse that, so thank you.
Any other comments? Councillor Gray.
Thank you very much, Chair, and I'd like to compliment the Executive Leader for a very spirited and excellent presentation. So I've long championed Huntingdonshire. I have lived in Huntingdonshire all of my life, just a little bit longer than Councillor Hunt. I'm very pleased to see the new signage as we come into Huntingdonshire, recognising where we are, although we do need to expand that out onto the trunk roads where the vast majority of people who are coming into Huntingdonshire see it. And civic pride is something that, as I have long talked about in the Cabinet and now in opposition, and it's something we should aspire to. That's definitely true. I think this is really interesting work. I like the thematic nature of it. I like the fact that you've reflected as you've gone along the journey. We've had conversations at ONS about engagement and engagement levels and depth of engagement. Outside of, I think it's interesting to see that the playback from the focus groups, outside of the aspiration to be a top 10 place to live, which is a very bold aspiration to make in the United Kingdom, but let's go for it. make decision making and funding equitable and inclusive, driven by the people it's meant to serve. That's the second point that came out of that focus group. And I think it's a really important thing for us to reflect on this journey, is that people have said, you know, this has got to reflect our priorities as we go through. And I was assured through the scrutiny process by yourself, Leader, this evening, that refining the strategy will be iterative. I think it's really important that we do that. And my expectation is that we can evidence that. So I think that's something that the officers might like to take away to think about how we can do that. I'm pleased to see some of the more, shall we say, ideological what-ifs seem to have been slightly more tempered down as we've gone through. So it gets my a qualified support from me this evening. But I think the important thing is in Q1, 23-24, there's going to be an action plan.
You certainly can.
Thank you very much, Councillor Gray. Absolutely, it's that iterative process. And the real challenge is, as soon as you put it on paper, you think, is that really what we quite mean? Because the words we pick, the context in which we say it, is a real challenge because it does evolve. And already there are some things in this that we already know are happening, because some people have come back and told us, there's a group of us that are already meeting and we're doing some of that, and you think that's fantastic, but it has to be iterative. And you're right, there will be an action plan coming. And the real challenge with the action plan, some things will be ours to do, particularly I think around convening and enabling. So some of this will be bringing groups together, but it won't necessarily mean that we run or lead all of those groups, because actually we're never going to have enough capacity if we're going to be as bold as we want to be. What we really want is people being self-starting and organisations being self-starting. And I'd quite like it to be so iterative, Councillor Gray, that we actually can't keep up with it because actually it's running. So that's our challenge. And then I'm going to struggle, and so are officers, as to how we play that back to you at ONS when we suddenly discover that actually there's all sorts of things happening. But that's exactly what this is intended to do. And I only say thank you very much because we inherited this as a visionary piece of work. I think it's something this council should be genuinely pleased to be part of. And I think it sets a new way of us working collectively into the future. So thank you.
Any further comments before we move to a vote? No? In that case then, can I have a show of hands for those who are supporting the strategy? Anyone against? And anyone abstaining?
Can I say thank you very much? What an exciting evening, because that, if Chair, if you're willing, can I segue then into the next presentation?
Yes.
So, there's a lovely link across here. It is really fortunate that we've been able to bring both to you this evening, because we're back in that theme of do, enable and influence. So this is the corporate plan for 2023 through to 2028. This is the council's corporate plan. This is your corporate plan. This is our corporate plan. And the important part of this is also responding to those things we've heard through the place strategy. So we have listened and reflected that back. We've done work with you, we've been listening, we've been thinking about what residents have been telling us and businesses, and we've tried to distill it. Now, if I don't say this next bit right, I shall get a yellow card from the councillor on the front row. Because one of the things, can we have the next slide please, one of our real challenges, and I think this would be fair after any election, regardless of the political makeup, we all come in and we're all going to solve the world and we're all going to do it on day one. But I'm reminded that the bulk of our work and activity is around our business as usual. And I'm going to come back to that in a minute. So I want to just explain what we're going to do under the priorities 1 and 2, which is outside of the business as usual. There are read across it. There are some read across there. But our business as usual sits mostly within priority 3. And that's where we spend 80% of our budget. So that might also help you understand the scale of the aspiration. But just as we've talked about with the place strategy, because we're ambitious, because you're ambitious, because we happen to work within a 4-tier authority, because government are interested in doing some things a little bit differently and some new things, we also think there's a bit of an opportunity to work smart across the system to meet some of these priorities over time, so that we are also not limited by our financial constraints and probably not by our time constraints. So I have to commend officers who took a whole bunch of words and made them actually into something which I'd quite like to have printed, so that as you walk around the building, we remember what we're trying to achieve collectively. So priority 1, improving the happiness and well-being of residents. Now that sounds all very soft and woolly, but it isn't, because actually this is linked to quality of life. This is linked to life chances and outcomes. This is measurable, because actually we know the indicators for people who are happy, healthy, and who have a good quality of life. This links back to the work we do around our open spaces, One Leisure, the work we do in partnership with Health, and more things that we have in the pipeline and we want to explore. And some of those are in your detailed papers. But actually, we also know that we play a vital role day to day about keeping people out of a crisis. We know that when people are in a crisis, we are an important part of the infrastructure. We're normally one of the first ports of call in terms of the help, advice, and practical support that we give people. But actually, we'd really like to keep them out of a crisis, full stop. We don't want them to need those services, and we're going to try and work really hard to reduce the number of people that need those services. We'll still provide them, they will still be there, but we would like people to need them less often. That means we have to work really hard to understand how people find themselves reaching a crisis point, and whether there is earlier intervention that we or partners could do to improve the chances of avoiding a crisis point. And some of that we've practiced greatly, for example, during COVID. We did lots of proactive work. We've been doing lots of work with our communities, but we think there's an opportunity to do even more. And of course, I've already covered, we will help those people who do find themselves in crisis. We know that's a key plank of the work that we do. We have whole teams that do that day in, day out, and they do it spectacularly. They make the impossible pieces of casework that many of us deal with, the heartbreaking messages saying, please, can you help me? And they just make things work. But as I say, the first 2 parts of this priority are the proactive early interventions that hopefully will reduce in time those that need us for that 3rd part. If we move on to priority 2, we've lumped these priorities into a pot, and really what it's talking about is a better Huntingdonshire for future generations. So you know, we've been talking lots about housing tonight. We had questions about the need to house people in our communities and the aspiration to see that social housing become available. But we also know, and we only have to watch the stories in the papers, that everybody needs good, high quality housing. They need to be safe and confident in the homes that they live in. And they have to be homes actually that you feel quite proud to live in. So we come back to pride in place. But also there is an opportunity, coming back to the climate strategy, to do more and to incentivise and encourage those who are providing housing in our district to look at how they can innovate to help us reach that 0 carbon target. That also means looking at sustainable travel. Ex-Councillor Morris, if you're watching, I did say sustainable travel. For those of you who know John very well, he'll be sat there writing that down and I'll get an email in the morning. But we are really serious about having to look at the ways in which we can move people around sustainably. Forward-thinking economic growth is absolutely vital. And actually, as you know, that links directly back to priority 1. Because actually we know from the research the single most important part of keeping people in a place which is not a crisis is normally to do with economic wealth. It's normally because people have a job and the job pays well enough to give people choices choices where they live, choices about how they live, and choices about the sort of life they would like to have. And we want everyone to have lots of really good quality choices. And this will be really important for our businesses. We have lots of businesses who have struggled through COVID. They have worked really hard to maintain their businesses. We want to see them grow and thrive and flourish. We want Huntingdonshire to be the place where people come to do that. But again, you've got to link that back through. We've got a climate ambition. Wouldn't it be great if we were the place where people not only built great businesses, but they built really fantastic sustainable businesses, where they actually innovated to provide active travel schemes as part of that. So we are still going to be really ambitious, and we are going to constantly think about how this plays in to that wider place strategy. Now, I can see at the moment, out of the corner of my eye, Mr. Morley is probably twitching because we don't have an infinite budget, and we spend most of our time doing business as usual and doing it incredibly well. So every so often he has to rein me back in when I get all excited about the great big next project. But I think that's one of our opportunities, because some things, even in this corporate plan, we won't do from here. We will enable and we will influence others to do with us, and sometimes possibly without us, but going in the direction that you've set. So lowering carbon emissions, we've talked long and hard about our aspirations for 2040. I think at every turn everybody says you still have to keep being really ambitious. We've heard tonight about alternative ways of keeping people on the move. We have lots of practical challenges ahead of us, but we're up for that journey. And so finally, turning to priority 3, this is about what we do every day of the week, and we already do it brilliantly. You've already heard Councillor Taylor say that why would you change something that isn't broken? We've got fantastic services that have been fantastic services for a long time. We've got a fantastic cohort of staff who work really hard for Huntingdonshire every day of the week in every service. But our business as usual may not necessarily always grab the headlines, and that's why we've made it a standalone priority in its own right, because it's as important as some of the new projects that you will see coming on stream. It's where we spend 80% of our money to face with our residents most often, most of the time. So we want to be really good at those. We want to provide exceptional service. We know there are practical challenges. DEFRA legislation around waste and some of the things that are coming. It will not be easy to continue to provide business as usual. It will still be a challenge, but we're up for that, and we've got great people to do it. So those are our 3 priorities. As you would expect, we are updating how we are going to measure those and play those back to you frequently and often. We know that some of the measures that we have at the moment don't quite do that. We'd kept them. Some of those we will probably keep so that we have some benchmarks. But there are new measures that will need to come in, which will be much more informative and will help you be able to look and see and judge how those services, how those priorities are being met. So again, I'm sorry to disappoint you that I'm not on my feet for about 40 odd minutes, but I'm very happy to take any comments or questions as we look, I hope, to move this forward by adopting it tonight.
Thank you very much. So again, we've seen the recommendation. Do we have a seconder for this, please? Councillor Sanderson. Thank you very much. I will now open up for debate. Do we have any questions or comments from the chamber? Councillor Pitt.
Thank you very much, Chair. So I just want to share that I think corporate plans aren't for everyone. And I think before I started on this process, I didn't think it was really for me. But actually, it's been a really exciting process to really think about what's the point. Why are we doing this business of running a council? What are we here for? And I think for some people, some of the language might feel quite woolly. That was woolly. I hope I pronounced that correctly. But actually, I think it's really important to think, for me, there's a sentence here, I might need my glasses again. So desire to focus on the efforts of the council on the priorities that matter to our residents. I think every ward councillor can recognise when their residents come to them, they're not interested in what HDC does, what anyone else, what other tiers of our authorities do. What can we do for them? And I think that's a really important message that we can carry through in all of our work. What actually improves the lives of our residents? Some of these challenges we've set before us are going to be really hard. Some of them may well turn out to be impossible, but that doesn't mean we shouldn't try. So I'm really excited to support this corporate plan, and thanks very much.
Thank you. Any further comments or questions? Councillor Gray?
Thank you very much. No, that's not right. Don't give me 50 seconds. That's not fair.
Starting from now.
Close. Thank you very much. So, I mean, look, I think there would be widespread support for these priorities. I think they look good. They've got aspiration. Are they dramatically different from what came before? Or indeed, if we anonymise this, would it look like another district council corporate plan? I think, you know, to your point there, you could argue that there would be some crossover there. My concern really is around the measures, because I think they look rather pedestrian. I'm not sure they're pointing in the direction of success and transformational change, and this is not a surprise to you. Let's take, for example, the measures for priority 2, create a better Huntingdonshire for future generations. Mr. Chair, when I scanned the priorities, not one of the do, enable or influencers really talks about the number of homes that are being built, how quickly planning applications are going to get decided. In fact, all the corporate actions that are on there don't actually have any measures by which we're going to measure against it for that particular item. And I feel that's an opportunity missed. I did raise this issue as it went through the scrutiny process. I heard what you said about we're going to do some work. We've offered to form, or the scrutiny panel under Councillor Gleadow has offered to help devise a reporting framework that goes through there. But I think that plans have to have operational performance measures that you're going to perform against. And because this doesn't have operational performance measures that I think really are appropriate, I'm afraid I won't be supporting the plan as it's written, despite a lot of good content and you know, I've a lot of goodwill towards a lot that's in there. But let's work to get better measurement and better performance data, please.
Absolutely.
Thank you. Councillor Gray, you heard at overview and scrutiny that that's the next stage. It isn't here tonight. Sorry, I've dropped my pen. It isn't here tonight because we want to do that with you. It's important this is about value added. It's important that when we look at those measures, you have as much confidence in them as we do and as officers do, because they are measures that this whole council has to be confident about. So there are measures behind these headlines. They're not all in this document, because otherwise the document would be huge. The answer is there are measures. We will share those with you, but they are iterative too. And we do need your help really to test them, because you have to be as confident as we are that we are measuring the right thing. Because if we don't deliver this, we don't deliver for Huntingdonshire. You know that's important. I know that's important. And to your point, is it vastly different from what's gone before? No, probably not, because we've built from it. And because you had the good intentions for Huntingdonshire, we have good intentions. There are 52 councillors who have good intentions, and we have been listening. And we will continue to listen. And this has to be something we all look at, and we are all confident speaks to the ambitions we collectively have for this council. So I would be actually more concerned if you said it looked very different, because I think that would probably tell us we weren't in the right place. I'm glad this looks familiar, but I hope also takes us forward, remembering that we've got a 20 to 30 year vision that our residents and our businesses have set for us. And so this is only stage one of that journey. And the challenge is every administration that the residents elect going forward has to continue to deliver year on year towards those ambitions. So I hope that gives you assurance. I will understand you reserving your position, that's quite right. But the answer is we're going to do that, and we want to do that with you, please, in partnership.
Councillor Davenport-Ray.
I'm quite excited about this corporate plan. I think it does look quite different than what we've seen before. And I think it has a good skeleton of what the corporate measures are going to be that we're going to use, something that we can build upon. So I would refer to page 18 of Appendix A, which includes metrics like the number of new affordable homes delivered, the percentage of planning applications processed on target, The percentage of planning applications processed on target for extensions, the number of planning applications over 26-week old where there's no current extension. So this is just a snapshot of some of those measures that are included in the appendix. And I agree we can continue to work on them, but I think that we've got the skeleton there, and I'm excited about how we build upon it.
Thank you.
Any, Councillor Nish?
Thank you, Chair. I think it's just to reiterate what I think Councillor Gray said, and actually going on to what Councillor Davenport-Ray has just mentioned there, that those measurements were already in there. And as Councillor Ferguson has pointed out in the past, some of them were pretty weak and probably still are because they're not actually in there. And I think that's a problem when, for myself, is actually looking at a corporate plan that hasn't got that, not full detail, but it seems to be very lacking in some of the detail on the measurements, which makes it difficult to challenge whether we're meeting those objectives or not. So for my view, I still have problems from looking at the numbers, looking at how the challenges will go forward for the future from a corporate plan perspective. And I think it will be particularly challenging for Councillor Ferguson when he actually has to look at the aspects of the challenge and scrutiny with the lack of information that's in there as to how the challenge comes. So but just leave that on with you.
Heard and understood. I think the answer is there is significant detail, but if there are things that you would like to see that you think that we haven't captured yet, we will keep that dialogue going because it's our plan collectively. It's yours as much as it is anybody else's.
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
But just briefly to come back, but that's the problem. It's here in front of us now to agree on it, and actually the figures on there. So it makes it a bit awkward to actually move forward with it when you're actually saying we still need to expand on it when actually we're asking to approve it now without that information. So.
So if I may, you have got a lot of detail in there. So I'm happy outside of the meeting to understand what you think is missing that we have not picked up in the scrutiny process. I think we feel that we've addressed all the things that we'd picked up at that stage. You have got lots of measurables, but if you think that there are others, we have significantly enhanced the measurables we inherited because some of them actually, they measured things, but they didn't really tell us enough. And so we have already done a lot of work, but it will be an iterative process too. And of course, when we achieve them all, Councillor Nish, we'll be able to then say, and what do we need to measure next?
Councillor Hodgson-Jones.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm afraid we're going to stack on the same subject. I've got a lot of experience of performance monitoring and performance measurements and scrutinizing things like that. And the point is that if you have performance targets, if you have objectives, they've got to be measurable. And the issue we have here is that we have laudable measures, but we don't have any figures attached to them. We have laudable targets, but they're not really targets. They're just, we're going to do better in these areas, or we're going to try and do better in these areas. What I'd like you to think about, because one of the things that I also appreciate when you look at corporate plans is you don't want a long and wordy document. And I congratulate you on having a brief, concise, and very pretty looking document here. It's pleasing to the eye, but it does that by lacking the detail. And I think that what you really need to think about is have the high-level corporate plan, but actually make a reference to some detailed performance measurements somewhere in it, that there will be a mechanism for performance monitoring, and then have that performance monitoring agreed and discussed with the scrutiny panels so that we actually have some thorough scrutiny. But actually, as the executive, you need to have those indicators, and officers need to have those indicators so they can actually manage to that. Because if you don't have that embedded in the system, then even when you do get the numbers, they're going to be dated, and you're going to come to them and say, well, we've only achieved X or Y, but what does that mean in practical terms? So I think you need to think about having a proper performance indicators and measurement system that doesn't need to be in detail in the plan, but it needs to be referenced that there is a basis for that.
If I may respond, I couldn't agree with you more. As somebody who used to do performance management for government, I thoroughly agree. The answer is It does exist. It's not all in this documentation, because otherwise we would give you something so weighty that actually we would get lost in the substance for this evening. And actually that's no different from our predecessors in terms of we've always presented a relatively easily accessible corporate plan behind which there is significant detail. So I look forward to discussing the KPIs with you, and we can argue over how we're going to measure them and which colour ratings we're going to give them when we're being successful. And if you haven't already heard me say it, we're going to be introducing purple for when we exceed expectations.
Councillor Ferguson.
Thank you, Chair. So I've been quite explicit about this during overview and scrutiny meetings, where I think that the targets are there to drive performance, and are there that as a council, not politically, we can spot the areas where we're not performing, and together we can work to solve those problems. So I am very in favour of setting robust targets, not unachievable targets, and working with the other side to make sure those measures are appropriate, because otherwise there's no point. It's not about saying, normally when we report that, I report that report, or I speak to that report, we go through and look at the reds and the yellows, yeah, and that's not really a measure of anything. We want to have early indicators to see where we are not serving the people of Huntingdonshire as well as we could do, yeah, and then we'll work together to find a solution. So I completely agree with you, and I'm happy to work with everybody to make sure that we set appropriate measures so that we can measure our performance together. Thank you.
Councillor Wakeford.
Thank you. I agree, unsurprisingly, with colleagues on this side of the chamber who've spoken already. I think in terms to address the more sort of technical challenge of the structure of the document, I think we've got actions which do have a significant measure of ambition in them, to a degree beyond what we've sought to do before, which was one of the challenges through scrutiny. In terms of the need for us to be realistic that came from parts of the chamber. But we've got that. We've also got measures in the document. Councillor Davenport-Ray next to me quoted some of them. They are more granular. They are drawn from the ones that worked best in what we inherited, having removed, as we've touched on, ones that were adding less value. There are some new ones in there as well. And I think it is appropriate that those have, as a measure, a greater longevity than the particular target that might be applied to them, because what we're doing in the document here is identifying what we're seeking to do and how we propose to measure that. The question of what good performance looks like, I think, is a question that takes more detailed consideration in light of and informed by having identified the measures that we actually want to focus on. So I think the structure of what is here for approval this evening, which I'll certainly look forward to supporting, and what follows in terms of developing our performance measurement as set out by Councillor Comboy and Councillor Ferguson, I defend entirely.
Any further comments before we move to the vote? No? Okay. So we are going to a vote. So I would like a show of hands for those who are in support of the implementation of the corporate plan. So those in favour, please show your hands. And those against? And anyone abstaining? Thank you very much, everybody. Moving on to item 10, the members' allowances. This is page 189 in your agenda packs. Councillor Comboy, can I ask you to present the report of the Independent Remuneration Panel, along with the additional amendment that will supersede the document that was circulated?
You can, Chair, but I think Mr Morley might be preparing to introduce it, if that's acceptable.
Good evening, councillors. As is customary with reports of this sort, it's a report of the Independent Remuneration Panel, so an independent report. The report rides plainly. sharing very openly the views of the independent remuneration panel, which is presented in front of you. What is then customary is for the joint administration to then move either a vote in support or an amendment in line with the proposal in front of you. So what you can see there is the independent remuneration panel report, following on the previous report of the IRP in September 2018 and following consultation with a number of you around the table. So I'd like to bring that to your attention and then back to you, Chair.
Councillor Gomboy.
Thank you very much, Chair, and thank you, Mr. Morley. So you have before you this evening the independent report. I'm going to speak to it in a moment, if I may, but I would like to propose an amendment. I believe that amendment has already been circulated before this evening, so members are in sight of it.
That should be on the table in front of everybody.
But just for the record, I will summarise the key points that form part of that amendment. And there is an additional amendment to that amendment, just because I'm aware there's been an issue that some of my colleagues have identified and would like us to address. So you have before you the Independent Remuneration Panel's report. However, this amendment suggests that we would not be comfortable taking the 6% recommendation of that independent panel when our staff are in fact receiving a pay award of 4%. And therefore we propose that we would want to increase the basic allowance for councillors in line with our staff awards. So to that end, you will see on the paper before you in bold a number of recommendations in terms of amendments. So A is that the level of basic allowance payable to all members in Huntingdonshire District Council be £4,918 per annum, which is an increase of 4% on the current rate. B, that the levels of special responsibility allowance be set in accordance with the basic allowance specified in A above and the calculations as previously applied by the Independent Remuneration Panel, now revised as detailed in the attached appendix. And J, that the indices to be used for indexation purposes to enable the members' allowance scheme to be adjusted for the period from May 2024 of up to 3 years. And there is an addition at K, that the proposed allowance for the Assistant Deputy Executive Leader be not paid until this role has been formally established within the Council's constitution. So I'd like to propose that, and then I believe we will have a seconder, and then I believe I might be allowed to speak to it. Is that correct? Have I got my... Thank you.
Yeah. Do we have a seconder for that?
Oh, sorry.
Chair, I would like to second the amendment and reserve my right to speak. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. So I just want to say very briefly a few words about why we are making the proposed amendment. Those of you who've been councillors in this chamber over the last 9 years will hear me say some things that you will have heard me say before, but I'm going to say them for the benefit of people who have not been in this chamber across that period of time. One of the things that has always worried me, and I know has worried a number of councillors from all groups across the chamber, is about making sure that people feel able to stand as councillors for election and feel that it's an inclusive opportunity to represent their residents. One of the real challenges about that is often about having a sufficient allowance that makes that possible. We all have different financial circumstances, we all have different working circumstances, different family circumstances, different aspirations, but out of our allowance we need to pay for our IT, we need to pay for some of the things that allow us to do our council work, but we are also really minded, I am minded, that I don't want people who would be fantastic ward councillors to be put off because the allowance does not allow them to feel that they can make that commitment to their community. It is difficult when we have a 6% recommendation, and we are now saying that we would be much more comfortable with 4%. It is difficult when we know that lots of people are still struggling with the cost of living. However, We also recognise that if we don't do this now, we only get to do this once every 4 years. And the real challenge is actually doing something that is appropriate, not just for the current members, but for the members going forward. We also want to make sure that there is clear transparency in how we make those allowances, particularly special responsibility allowances. I have to tell you that I'm not sure I had ever understood how we came to the figures we did. I'm not suggesting they're incorrect, but the transparency that this now allows us, I think, will give everybody comfort that they understand why we have that structure and how that structure works. So I'm going to pause there. I will listen to the debate, but I hope that people will feel able to support the amendment.
Thank you. Any comments or questions? Councillor Sanderson.
Oh, sorry.
Thank you, Chair. I support this amendment to the recommendation of the remuneration panel. And I think I share the view that we all do, that nobody serves as a councillor for the money particularly. I don't think anybody really has that in mind when they put their name forward. But I've seen quite a lot of different people become councillors in this chamber over the years that I've served. And I believe that all of them, regardless of which group they sit in, are genuinely committed to making a difference in our communities. And there are, of course, plenty of us that do that in many other walks of life, not just as councillors. Of course, there are a few exceptions to that rule, and despite the publicity that may generate, they are few and far between. So I think it's entirely correct that we don't take an increase any higher than that given to the staff in the recent pay award. We don't take the 6% recommended. Instead, we go for the 4% suggested in the amendment. Now, our staff team face considerable challenges in an increasingly difficult system, and they continue to make our residents' lives better each day with their hard work and dedication. But as we know, inflation and the cost of living is still unacceptably high. It actually increased last month, and we've seen the impact on the lives of ourselves, our friends, our families, and our colleagues. So I think all councillors want to make life better for our residents, and those willing to seek a role in public service should not be penalised from doing so. And this must include people from all different walks of life and backgrounds and economic circumstances. There has to be a realistic system in place for them to be compensated for their willingness to put themselves forward for election and serve their residents as well as serving the whole district. We need to remove the barriers that people face, but at the same time we need to be responsible and set a good example. I believe this amendment does that. I'm very happy to second it. As Councillor Conboy said, this is a once in every 4 years debate that we have here. We need to have an inclusive and sufficient allowance system for our members, and I think this meets it. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Keane.
Chair. On a procedural point of order, I've noticed that there's an amendment from the opposition. When are we going to debate that amendment? Because it makes it difficult to work out when I'm going to speak, that's all. So could you clarify, please?
As there's an amendment on the table, the proposal would be to take a vote on this amendment to see if that becomes a substantive motion, at which point any further amendments can be moved.
Did you want to?
No, I thought.
Oh, okay.
Okay. So only one amendment can be discussed at any one time. So there is an amendment on the table at the moment. That amendment must be moved to a vote. If it's supported, that becomes a substantive motion, and then any further amendments can then be moved. So there'll be a vote on the amendment to see if that becomes the substantive motion. Yeah. So that will become the substantive position. If there's a further amendment, that will then be moved. Yeah.
So do we have any other thoughts, comments or questions? Councillor Hodgson-Jones.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think it would be prudent, just for the benefit of all colleagues, that I speak at this moment in time, because I think just want people to be clear that, certainly from this side, that it's important that the amendment that the leader has proposed is actually carried, because if the amendment is not carried, we're then actually working from the Independent Remuneration Panel's actual recommendations. And then if our amendment were then carried, it would be carried against the original recommendations from the IRP rather than against the amendment as what becomes a substantive notion. And I think I make that point for clarification. I hope that doesn't preclude me from speaking later on an amendment. Thank you.
Any further comments before we move? Okay, so if we can move to the vote, if we could have a show of hands for those who are in support. And against? And anyone abstaining? No. So the substantive motion is carried.
No, so that becomes,
sorry.
So that becomes the substantive motion.
Substantive motion. Thank you. Do we have any other amendments?
So, in light of the current financial pressure on both HDC and the general public, the amendment would be to resolve to note the report of the IRP, but to freeze the members' allowance at the current 2022-23 level, and to revisit this decision after the annual council meeting in 2024. And I'd like to reserve my right to speak as well.
Do we have a seconder for that?
I'd like to second, Chair, and also reserve my right to speak.
Thank you. Councillor Ferguson.
Thank you, Chair. As I mentioned earlier, I'm an engineer, and actually a full-time engineer, because I can't afford to be a councillor and pay my mortgage. And as an engineer, I like basing my decisions on data. So in preparation for this debate today, I took the liberty of researching allowance increases, or more accurately, lack of increases, under the previous administration. So now, Chair, I'm going to ask you to cast your mind back 10 years ago, which for members of the Conservative Party, it was about 5 Conservative Prime Ministers ago, and back in the days when David Cameron was in charge. Back in 2013, the basic allowance for HDC members was £4,235, a figure that remained unchanged for the next 5 years, before the Conservative administration hit residents with a shock 6% increase the year after an election. In fact, in 7 out of the past 10 years, Conservative administration voted for a 0% increase in allowances. So when I read in this amendment, in the light of current financial pressures, well, back when inflation was 2% and 3%, you called for a 0% rise, and now it's 10%, when some people really need it, it's still a 0% rise. So in real terms, that £4,235 allowance from 2013, if it had risen with inflation, would have increased by 46%, and today we'd be voting on basically on a £6,000 basic allowance for councillors. Instead, we were supposed to be voting on a £4,918 basic allowance, which we just did, but you're again asking for us to freeze it at 0%. This means that in real terms, that today's councillors are more than £1,000 worse off than 2013 councillors. So in other words, the previous administration has devalued the role of being a councillor by around 30%. Now, I wasn't around in 2013, and like Councillor Sanderson, none of us do this for the money, but I'm pretty sure that none of you lot are doing 30%.
Sorry, you've
done
your time. Sorry.
Sorry. Oh, is that my time? Oh,
it
God.
is. Sorry.
Sorry. I won't be supporting this amendment. Thank you.
Councillor Corney.
Thank you, Chair. We've just heard that, and a long way before my time, actually, as well, but after a year after an election, this side of the chamber gave itself a 6% pay rise, which is bad. A year after, well, not even a year after the elections, we can go 4% pay rise. It's good. I didn't vote for, in the last term, I didn't vote for a raise in the allowance. It goes against everything I believe in at the moment. I'm pleased that there's an option to sort defer this for a year, but in a year's time, I don't think I'll be comfortable with it then, as I'm not comfortable with it now. So I can't, I won't vote for the allowance rise, and I hope that people will vote for the amendment to at least move this along for another year to decide. But in the current climate, I don't think it doesn't sit well with me. And I stand here now. I'm not a well-off person by any means. I struggle and I work my socks off to do what I do. And as everybody else does, I'm not discrediting anybody in this room. We're all here for the right reasons, but an allowance, that's not the right reason in my mind. So I can't support that. Thank you.
Any further comments? Councillor Gray.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think there are a few sites more inelegant than councillors discussing allowances, so I'll try not to be inelegant this evening. But the reason why I'm not supporting it is this is a poor report, in my view. It's a cut and paste job. If you open the report on your browser, the tab on your browser reads the Vale of White Horse in South Oxfordshire. Above and below the HDC logo on the title page, you can see the watermark of West Berkshire. The appendix comparator councils are all from Kent, Surrey, Sussex, Hampshire and Oxfordshire. I did enjoy some of the amusing comments from councillors that are put in the appendix there, but my main objection to this, and the reason why I would like us to pause and go and think again and get the IRP or get another IRP to do a proper job on this, is that I think some of the recommendations are just bizarre and they don't reflect the evolution of workload that has taken place since 2018. I think in a commendable attempt to produce a scheme that was balanced and had nil extra cost, just some odd decisions have arisen. And the worst of all is that the executive leader is worth less next year in cash terms, forget about real terms, in cash terms, than she is now. Now that is bonkers. The workload and demands on the leader and the sheer number of interruptions to her calendar and to her days has dramatically escalated since 2018. So this report, in my view, isn't worth the paper it's written on. There are several other examples I could cite, but I think council gets my drift. Whatever proposed will not be perfect. I think we'll all accept that. But this scheme, as written down here by this IRP, is very far from perfect in my view, and it will not get my support.
Councillor Ferguson.
On a point of order, under section 13.5 of the Constitution, we have 5 minutes to debate in speeches.
We've just recognised that, so apologies. Did you want to speak further, Councillor Ferguson? Councillor Hodgson-Jones.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. You might not be surprised that when I was first elected to this council less than a year ago, that was not my first election. I stood for the first time as a council candidate more than 40 years ago. And when I then stood, I had absolutely no idea that there were any allowances for anybody. And that was true for the next few times I stood. And it was only when I first became a councillor about 15 years ago that I discovered, much to my surprise, that there were allowances paid to councillors and there were costs. The point I'm making is that people do this because they want to serve their community. Yes, it's viable and it's sensible to provide an allowance, but we need to be realistic about what those allowances are and why they increase. And it is imperative that councillors should not receive increases greater than the staff who work for the authority, which was why I felt that it was important that the underlying amendment should have passed, because if we don't get our amendment to zero the increase, what the independent remuneration advisor has proposed is actually quite staggering in the circumstances. And it's not a report that I could possibly support. And I think there's too many examples where it's just a mechanical process, and it shouldn't be. It should reflect what is actually the responsibility, particularly for special responsibilities. They should reflect the respective responsibility and the relative responsibility, not just be some mechanical percentage of the notional allowance. And that's why I feel that what this amendment does is not just to freeze our councils for this year, but puts us in a position to come back next year and do the job properly. And I think that's the important reason why all parties in this chamber should support this amendment. Thank you.
Councillor Davenport-Ray.
When I speak to local people about politics, many of them would like to be involved. And so when I read the amendment before us and the proposal to freeze member allowances, I'm surprised to see it listed next to the current financial pressures felt by our general public. Because our general public, because of these financial pressures, need to have more representation, not less. And if we freeze councillor allowances, that makes it even less possible for them to achieve. So frankly, I find the proposal of an allowance freeze quite insulting to the residents who would like to be in this chamber, but who cannot afford to be here. And so I won't be supporting it.
Any further comments? Councillor West?
I'm a little bit surprised to hear that 4% increase is going to dramatically change our democracy and thousands be coming through the door. That's what I can't understand. I simply cannot understand the remark. Chairman, Councillor Ferguson's right. I've been here since 2006 and the allowance has been eroded. I accept that. But we're in a particular situation. Therefore, all we're asking for, we're just asking for two things as I understand it. One, we're asking to freeze members' allowances until 2022-23, to revisit the decision after annual council meeting, and Councillor Gray is asking for a genuine report, not a report that's pasted from counties which have probably a higher income than we do. So all we're asking for a freeze in the present circumstances, and also we're asking for a good report that really does meet what we need. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. There was a hand that went up over here. Councillor King.
Yeah, I think we all agree that we're not in it for the money. And I think the thing that's key here is already you voted on an amendment to reduce the membership allowance by 2%. So why don't we go and show some real leadership, freeze it for a year, and go back and do a proper job?
Councillor Alban.
If I may speak a second to the motion, Chair. This time last year, 126 Huntingdonshire residents put themselves or preparing to put themselves up for election. None of them had their arm twisted. Well, all right, some may have had their arm twisted. And actually, when I first stood for the council, one of my mates in the village said to me, he said, I thought you'd win, but he said, what I can't work out is why you'd want to do it. And unlike Councillor Davenport-Ray, we all represent different wards. The question I get asked more, I've never been asked, actually no, once I was asked about the money, do you get paid to do it? But the question is, how do you find the time to do it? And I think the pressures on members, from my experience, isn't the money, because we've all admitted we're not in for it for the money, is the time and the time pressures and having to take leave to come to daytime meetings, which is one of the reasons I stood to be a district councillor, because our meetings are in the evening. So brings me on to my other point. If we didn't know what we were letting ourselves in for, in terms of time that it would cost us, the investment we'd have to make in the time off work, the time in the evening, we could certainly knew, if we had been here before, we could certainly know, or we could certainly find out what the financial reimbursement would be for being a district councillor. So this time last year, we either knew if we were existing councillors, or we could have looked up on the internet what the basic allowance would be and what the special responsibility allowance would be should we be appointed to that role. Those were there, we stood for election knowing or being able to find out that that was the situation. That in mind, because we knew that when we stood almost a year ago, it's not right for us to come in less than a year later and say we want more money for doing it. Our allowances are exactly that. they're an allowance, not a salary, and as such, it's not subject to the same, shouldn't be, in my opinion, subject to the same percentage increase considerations as our members of staff. Even though I'd say, I agree with it, we shouldn't be looking at increases above what our members of staff are being paid. I appreciate the time and effort the working party has put into their report, but when we've recognised the cost of living crisis in motions in previous meetings of this council, I think it is it's important that we recognise it, not just that meeting, but we recognise it in this meeting too, and say to the writers of this report, thanks, but no thanks. And in conclusion, I would say not just to say thanks, but no thanks for the increase that they're proposing, thanks, but no thanks for the amendment, but thanks, no increase at all. Let's look at it next year when the economy might be in a different position. Who knows, we might even have a different government by then and different pressures. I mean, I can remember when I was first elected in the old CISO system, and I was encouraged as a young county councillor, claim everything you're entitled to. And the sign-on, slope-off days are gone. And now we're faced with a basic allowance that no matter how hard a councillor works or how hard a councillor doesn't work, all our basic allowance is the same. There's no perfect system on that. We've got the system it is. Who knows, an incumbent government might change it. But let's look at it next year. Let's look at it in the round. Let's see where we are then, see where the economy is then, and then look and see and have a proper, considered debate and discussion and scrutiny of a better report than the one we've got in front of us.
Councillor Pitt. Councillor Orban, could you turn your microphone off?
Sorry,
Thank
Chair.
you.
Thank you, Chair. So, just very briefly, so this year I'm currently in the Cabinet. I'm also the Mayor of St Neots, both roles extremely busy for me. I had to think very carefully whether I could do both of them. I decided I'll do a third one, third the other, and a third my day job. I've got the mixed blessing of being a freelancer. I do a couple of days freelance. I hope my employer's not watching. I do barely any of my day job, and that's a choice I'm able to make because there is an allowance. At the current level, it's not much, but it allows me to get through the year. Every year that we freeze it, it becomes that much harder to recover from that. If you freeze it and then jump by double the amount next year, I think that's unhelpful. To keep a reasonable, a modest increase in line with our own staff, I think is appropriate. So I won't be supporting the amendment. Thank you.
Councillor Wakeford.
Thank you, Chair. I recognise that views across the chamber on this are sincerely held, and there are strong views on it, which we've heard articulated in a balanced way. But fundamentally, I do agree with Councillor Graves' characterisation of how it looks debating our allowances. So I will seek to be brief. I think in proposal, an argument for the additional amendment on the table before us at the moment. We've heard both that this is a proposal that will somehow make a significant difference in the context of council funding and cost of living crisis, but also that it will make an insignificant difference. And I can't quite reconcile the coherence between those positions and what's in front of us. The independent report is independent for a reason. There's obvious reasons that do not require spelling out as to why we are led by independent advice on this rather than making a decision ourselves. So a very deliberate decision has been taken by our Cabinet and administration not to seek to tweak to second guess the report in detail and on all of its points. We've simply sought to apply a very clear high-level principle, which is to limit any increase to match that received by our staff. I think that is appropriate and defensible. I think it's consistent, and I think it avoids getting into more detailed debate about matters that we have asked independent persons to report to us on. So with respect to the arguments being made in support of this amendment, I will be voting against it, but then in favour of the substantive motion as already amended this evening for reasons colleagues have set out.
Councillor Sanderson.
Thank you, Chair. I've known Councillor Orban and I have known each other so long I can actually remember when he was a county councillor back in the 1980s. And I may have even been the one who asked him the question, are you in it for the money? I probably didn't, but I know he wasn't. He served with some distinction back then as a very young county councillor. As Councillor Wakeford said, actually the principle here is we are, in the substantive motion, recommending less than the increase that the remuneration panel have come up with. We've said, and I repeat, we won't take any more than the staff pay increase. That's a matter of principle. And I think we do need to be a bit realistic here. I think some of us that have been around politics a while, we know why our colleagues across the aisle have put this amendment down, and we'll probably see that in leaflets in the run-up to elections. They want to be able to say to us, look, I'll say to the voters, joint administration have increased their own allowances, but we voted against and said we didn't want anything. That's the reality of politics. We all know that. But I won't be supporting this amendment. As I said when I spoke earlier, we don't do it for the money. People do it because they're very committed. And as Councillor Pitt correctly outlined, there needs to be a realistic system in place, and that needs to have a realistic increase. This is still substantially below the rate of inflation. Inflation's running at over 10%, and I know there are hopes that the economy will improve, but that obviously will take some time. But I'm not in support of this amendment. Thank you.
And finally, Councillor Lowe.
Thank you, Chair. Whilst all my colleagues across both sides of the parties, at a time of the cost of living crisis our residents are facing, how can we justify the percentage increase when our residents themselves are struggling to support with no increases in, or very low increases in wages, as they will be paying towards this cost of living wage? So I'm in favour of this amendment. Thank you.
Thank you. So if you could just remind us of your amendment proposal.
Yeah, in light of the current financial pressures on both HTC and the general public, this council resolves to note the report of the IRP, to freeze members' allowance at the current 2022-23 level, and to revisit the decision after the annual council meeting in 2024.
So those in favour of Councillor Keane's amendment, please show your hands. And those against? Thank you. Yep. And that. Yep. So thank you very much, everyone. So that amendment has fallen. So we will now go to the substantive item and hold a vote on. So, do you want to? Yeah, so we're back to the original.
I'm going to just check with officers. So we've already got a substantive motion. What do you need me to do now to move
So
that?
you have a right to speak, otherwise we can move the vote.
Thank you very much. So thank you. I have listened with interest, and I have listened. I genuinely have listened. For what it's worth, I'm not sure any of us are entirely comfortable. But then I also looked at the recommendation of the Independent Remuneration Panel, and then I looked also what our neighbouring authorities are doing and what's also happened elsewhere. And this is still much less. And then having listened to what's being proposed to us, I also thought back then about the last time we were asked to consider this and the recommendation that came from my colleagues on this side of the chamber. We actually, I don't think we're in this room. I seem to remember we might have been in Burgess Hall. But I remember distinctly the arguments. It's as if the arguments have literally changed sides in the chamber, which is somewhat unusual. But I think it also reflects the need to make a decision, and a decision we believe is the right one. I am genuinely minded about the fact that we have spent longer debating this than we have the 20 to 30 year vision and the plan for the next 5 years. So on that point, I'm going to take my seat and I'm going to move the motion.
Okay, so the motion is now to be put to the vote. So all those in favour, please raise your hand. And those against? And that is carried. Moving on to item 11, the Great Gransden Neighbourhood Plan. So following the Great Gransden Neighbourhood Plan referendum held on the 9th of March, the Deputy Leader and Executive Councillor for Planning will now present the report by the Chief Planning Officer. This is page 237 in your agenda. Councillor Sanderson.
Thank you very much, Chair. The report is in front of you. The referendum on the Great Gransden Neighbourhood Plan was held on the 9th of March 2023. There was a result, it was 91.27% in favour. In raw numbers, that was there were 816 voters in Great Gransden, 229 voted, and 209 of those voted in favour. The turnout was 28, just over 28%. So the recommendation is to make the Great Gransden Neighbourhood Plan in the form attached as in Appendix 1, such that it becomes part of the statutory development plan for Huntingdonshire with immediate effect. And I'd just like to express my thanks to the Parish Council who've worked extremely hard and I think produced an excellent neighbourhood plan.
Thank you very much. Do we have a seconder? Councillor Ferguson.
Can I speak, please, Chair? So as I mentioned earlier, Councillor West and I spend a rather unnatural amount of time together in parish council meetings, and one of our favourite meetings is Great Gransden. It's a great village and a great parish council, and we've both seen all the many, many hours of dedicated work that's gone into producing this neighbourhood plan. I urge you to support it, and I also urge you to go out to your own villages and urge them to start consulting on constructing their own neighbourhood plans, because as we go through the process of moving towards a new local plan, neighbourhood plans are one of the best ways that firstly villages can tell us how they want us to develop in and around their village. It's about helping them to secure the facilities they need, but also helping them to defend themselves from kind of unwanted hostile developments on their borders. So I think this is a great document, and I urge you to vote for it and also to take it around to your parish councils too. Thank you.
Councillor West.
Chairman, I'm thrilled to see this on the agenda. Also, I'm indebted to Councillor Ferguson for his kind remarks. When we do spend time together at Great Gransden, I always feel that there are a group of councillors that generally care about their village. And I think this Neighbourhood Plan Committee worked so hard, Chairman, to get it right. And I believe they have got it right. So I think it's tremendous to see it on the agenda, and I hope everyone will support it. And I thank Councillor Ferguson for his remark.
Any other comments or questions? Councillor Sanderson.
Chair, I'm enjoying the love-in between Councillor Ferguson and Councillor West this evening. I think that's actually very positive. Another point perhaps just to make as well is, although we are going through the local plan process at the moment, we're still encouraging, as Councillor Ferguson said, we still need to encourage, and we are encouraging parishes their neighbourhood plan work, and of course they receive an uplift in their seal contributions. That will be 25%. So it's in their interests, I think, to do that. I'm happy to move the recommendation.
Councillor West.
Chairman, I must say that I think the loving between Councillor Ferguson and myself is about our genuine desire to do all we can for a village that we have a great deal of and people who have a great deal of respect. And last time he accused us of looking for stuff to put on our leaflets. But if he looks back at my leaflets, he won't see much stuff, because I only go out once every 4 years. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your comments. Councillor Alban.
Thank you, Chair. Could I pay tribute to Councillor Gardner, who put parishes in my ward in touch with Grafham Parish Council who'd gone ahead of this. And Mr Moore is nodding because he was at a meeting that Councillor Butell and I organised, where Chair of Glatton Parish Council was so enthused by the meeting in Grafham, which Councillor Gardner has set up. He's enthused other parishes, so Stilton are moving forward with their local plan, the Giddings are moving forward with their local plan, and doing that in association with Steeple Gidding Hamerton in Councillor Martin and Councillor Bywater's ward. And I think the thing that's come out of all of this is one parish council does it well, and they enthuse another parish council, and they enthuse another parish council, and it goes on. And the further we go on down the line, the more experience there is, and the more experience there is in amongst our officers and knowing that the neighbourhood plans are coming. But I think the really key thing, and it goes back to the point raised earlier on by one of my colleagues about training for parish councillors, this is peer training, and so much can be gained from what has already been done, that the wheel doesn't have to be reinvented. And I think it's great that we can facilitate parish councils to work together in this way.
Councillor Dew.
Thank you, Chair. Can I just say I agree with that comment entirely. No, thank you. You will recall this council once had a policy of saying that the local plan was all that this council needed. There was no need for neighbourhood plans, and some of us fought long and hard at that time across both parts, both the political groups. It wasn't just necessarily Conservative or Liberal or any other area where we felt that that wasn't the way forward. The first plan we had, if I'm thinking right, was St Neots, which had a terrible birth, but actually set the ball rolling. And I think the fact that various councils have actually cottoned onto it since, and it's got a better, more inclusive process as time goes by, is a credit to all those councils involved, and indeed to us as a council for being open and not just sitting there on our original policy, which I look back on now and think actually, whilst at the time seemed right, was in fact totally inappropriate. Thank you.
Any further comments before we go to a vote? No. So all those in favour, please raise your hands. And I think that is unanimous.
Thank you very much, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you. Item 12, Cambridgeshire and Peterborough Combined Authority updates. So this is a standing agenda item that provides district council members the opportunity to ask questions and comment on the combined authority. And now, as a number of meetings were only held last week, please note that we have not been provided with any decision summaries to circulate with the agenda on this occasion. Councillor Conboy will now present details of the activities of the combined authority, and questions will be invited after the presentation.
Thank you very much, Chair. So this is the March meeting. You will know that you can find the reports online, so I'm hoping you've all read the 1,000+ pages that were this month's reports. The meeting was 4 hours. I'm going to try and do it in 4 minutes. So, on your marks. Don't put the timer on in case I overrun. So there's a monthly roundup. We'll make sure you have these slides. It really is worth reading. It's a new feature as part of these reports, and it will help all councillors to get a sense of the work the Combined Authority is doing overall. The improvement plan update, I have to apologise to Sir Bob Kerslake, who I've known over a number of years in a number of roles. I think he is now Lord Sir Bob Kerslake. He's needed to step down due to ill health, but I can tell you that the consensus is that the plan is making good progress. There is still work to do. We have work still around procurement and value for money, which are key areas that Whitehall would like assurance about, but there are clear plans in place and progress is being made. So we are making a move forward. The Combined Authority governance arrangements, I won't talk on very much because I know that my colleagues are going to do that, but the intention is to create greater assurance, and this was unanimously approved. The review of the Constitution seeks to make it better and more fit for purpose, and makes the ways of working more seamless for staff at the local authority whilst giving us good governance. So that was also much welcomed. The Climate Action Plan annual report was a very useful document because for the first time we were able to see We were able to see what our partner local authorities are working on. We were urged to be more ambitious to achieve our goals at the combined authority and to do more engagement on young people. We used our example here. You'll remember not very long ago you actually had a copy of the report from one of our young people, and the combined authority will take that forward. And the Oxford to Cambridge Pan-Regional Partnership, you will know that we are a member of that partnership, and there are seats on boards as that starts to emerge. But I want to cut to the chase, and there should be a set of slides, I think, that go with this. There is, but you can't see them on screen. Market Towns, Rural Hinterlands. The award for the first person to have read this, spotted it, goes to a gentleman on the back row, Councillor Brereton, who contacted me not very long after this had been reported and said, how do we get involved in Ramsey? So thank you very much, Councillor. We pass that information on. But please do have a look. This is new money coming on stream, but it's very, very early days. Market Towns. Good news, we've got a yes for our proposals, so you will find there is new money coming in for Huntingdon and St Ives Market Town regeneration, so Broadway Cycle Link scheme, St Ives Community Bandstand, the Shopfront Grant scheme in Huntingdon and St Ives Town Centres, the Cromwell Museum expansion and the Huntingdon Bid Visitor Information. All really good news. And also we've been allowed to amend the St Ives master plan to make sure that we are also now able to include a public art programme, design and development of a stage entertainment area on the Market Square, digital information service and a co-retail scheme where we'll provide budding retailers and entrepreneurs with space within a commercial unit to sell and promote their products.
Can I just clarify? You said St Ives, did you mean St Neots?
The master plan is St Neots, sorry.
Yeah, you said St Ives.
The other one, sorry, and the other one is St Ives. Sorry, St Ives, if you were getting all excited. And St Neots, it's okay.
I was excited.
You're getting your stage.
Excited.
It's really important. No, apologies. I didn't mean to confuse you, so that's trying to do it in 4 minutes. Last page then, just last updates. The Greater South East Net Zero Hub Local Energy Advice Demonstrator Projects. Well, that's a mouthful, isn't it? More retrofit schemes are in the pipeline. And as part 7, the Skills Committee recommendation to the Combined Authority is more funding for Cambridgeshire Regional College, including our part of it in Huntingdon, and more Multiply Maths courses. And I've seen some of those advertised this week. Other projects that will be of interest, Peterborough are developing a new electric bus depot that also may service some vehicles that will cover our area. And just before I get asked the question, yes, I'm still lobbying for transport in the northwest and buses, and I've had a promise from Mr. Bellamy that we are going to be doing that work, and he's coming back to me again shortly. That was today's email. And finally, and I put on my slides, watch this space for an announcement, but I'm pleased to tell you that Rob Bridge has been appointed. It's now in the public domain, and I may be biased because he may happen to live in my ward, and I think he'll do a very good job championing the Combined Authority. I'm happy to take questions, but hopefully it won't require me to read the 1,000 pages and reference the page numbers.
Councillor Gray.
Thank you, Chair. And I can see the sort of sense of crushedness in you. The fact that the public entertainment space is not available in St Ives. But I'm sure in the emerging corporate plan we can find space for that. I'm not going to ask my usual question at this particular point in time because I know the answer to it, i.e. absolutely nothing has happened and we're now in purdah, so nothing's going to happen for another couple of months. So I'll pass on that. And you have touched on the point that I wish to ask a question on, which is I think it's excellent news that Rob Bridge has been appointed. He's experienced, he knows his stuff. He's brought Northamptonshire together after I think what can only be described as a turbulent birth or troubled birth. So I'm really excited because it, I think, offers us the stability and the chance to get some stability into that organisation that it has been badly lacking from day one. What do you think, Executive Leader, are his largest and most pressing challenges?
So I was in a conversation today. We know that government's looking at whether it's going to do more devolution deals. The biggest challenge, other than making sure that the combined authority does what it needs to do now, is actually making sure we're in the right place for what comes next, and that Huntingdonshire gets its fair share of that slice. So we are working hard here, and we've been having conversations just in the last couple of weeks, and today I was in a conversation where I was looking about the strategic objectives of government and trying to work out what comes next and how we make the virtues for Huntingdonshire shine. And actually that 20 to 30 year vision is really critical in that, because one of the things I think is going to be key for the combined authority going forward is actually helping Whitehall get out of its silos. That was the ambition back in 2012 with the Heseltine Review, was to get government out of its silos and get the money on the ground working better. And we have a really good story to tell because we now have a 20 to 30 year vision. We are very clear what is wanted here and what the ambitions are. And we want to be one of the top 10 places. So we need to find the money to enable that. And this is part of that picture.
Councillor West.
Executive Leader, I think you realise the tremendous respect I have for you, but this may sound a bit sarcastic. But I just wonder, after Heseltine's 2012, when I look back, when I look around the district and see what it actually has delivered, and what she delivered in other districts, I asked myself, was it really necessary, the combined authority? We've got county councils, district councils, parish councils, and then we get this. And frankly, 1,000 pages, Chairman. I mean, half the hammers have been cut down. Don't tell Lara, she won't sleep tonight. or the electric grill's been under pressure. It does seem a lot of paperwork and a lot of talk, but very, very little delivery. But I wish you well, because you are very positive, and I'm sure you'll do your best.
Thank you very much, Councillor West. I have to tell you, luckily I'd looked before I considered whether I was going to print it. Some nights I do need to have paper copies in front of me. Sometimes I can manage quite well from an electronic device. But I will reassure you that one of the things that worries me most is being able to be clear what Huntingdonshire gets from this arrangement. And the real challenge is a lot of the government policy targets levelling up, and we are often on the periphery of the criteria. And that's why I think we have to have a different approach to how we make the case and how we try to get Huntingdonshire in a better place. But the real challenge, and we have told the Improvement Board, is we also need government to stop giving us money at no notice for tiny projects, because we can't plan, we can't be strategic, and we can't create a pipeline. We can't work like that. It's the most ineffective way of working. So if nothing else, if government listens and actually plans and then helps that delivery come into fruition, we will be in a better place. So at every opportunity we are making that known, but there's more work to be done. And I'll be honest, if it was easy, my predecessor would have resolved all these issues. Some of these have been intractable issues probably from day one, but we are making progress, and I'm not giving up. I think this is a vehicle that can do good.
Thank you very much, Councillor Conboy. Oh, Councillor Ferguson.
Just on that point, Chair, Councillor Conboy, could you please remind the new Chief Executive, something that was often forgotten in combined authority politics, that after Peterborough, Huntingdonshire is the most populous district in the county, or in the proper county, it's the biggest. And quite often, I think our voices have been drowned out by smaller districts like Fenland and East Cambs, which combined are only about the same size as Huntingdonshire. So please make him aware, and I'm sure as a resident he is aware how important the voices of our population is. Thank you.
Ferguson, the answer is I think he's ready to get started, and I think he'll be somebody we will see a great deal of. It is very convenient that that the previous managing director managed to persuade the combined authority that they needed to have their offices here in our building, and the answer is I would expect all of you to get to know Mr. Bridge really well, and he will be very willing, I think, to have those conversations with each and every one of us.
Thank you very much. Moving on, we now have a brief presentation of the activities of the Overview and Scrutiny Committee with a brand new duo. No pressure, Councillor Niche.
Thank you. I have a new partner, Councillor Niche. I believe some of you may know him. Okay, so can I have my first slide, please? I'm going to flash through this one because Councillor Conboy has been through the majority of the area here on the improvement framework. I think probably the bottom 7 areas are the things that are worthwhile noting. I'm not going to read them all out, but the improvement framework has been reframed. I think I alluded to this last time, where I said a lot of areas of projects were amber. They've now gone green because the whole thing has been reframed. So we do need to watch this space. Probably the most important thing that has been issued over the last quarter is this the best value notice, which was issued in 24th of January 2023. So that shows that there are measures in addition to the audit that the CPCA are being held to. But if I just move on to the next slide. I talked about the effectiveness of the committee, and this is still work in progress. So, for example, John and myself didn't get this letter. It was given to, I think, to the chair of the committee, but wasn't distributed across the whole of the committee. So we actually received this on the day. So there are still some elements of overview scrutiny compared to the overview scrutiny committees here, where I think everyone gets, not as ideal as everyone would always want it, but the majority of papers come to the overview scrutiny at the right time, with enough time to review it and to receive quite important documents in the middle of the meeting. Literally, it's not good. There are a number of proposals that are in place that hopefully should make things better. So firstly, more effective officer engagement. At the moment is that officers need to liaise directly with lead members at the Overview and Scrutiny Committee. It has been quite difficult for members of Overview and Scrutiny to actually engage with the officers, so they're not fully briefed. A key thing that we agreed at the meeting this time was to put forward, or try to put forward, a constitutional amendment for an information protocol for the ONS. So it means that it's actually written down as to when documents should be delivered to the ONS committee, so that review can be done properly. The business board function needs to be better understood, and particularly its interaction with the ONS documented. And there is some optimism that by June, because of the improvement plan, things will improve. So I guess we will look forward to seeing those improvements come through, because really we do want to be an effective ONS, and I think that's helpful to the board and everyone concerned. And certainly, yes, going back to the first document, value is going to be a big thing, I think. But I'm going to hand over to my colleague.
Welcome. I'm going to be very brief. The leader will know exactly where I'm going to come from here. It was a lot of Groundhog Day. Having served in Overview and Scrutiny probably 4 years ago, it was almost nothing had moved on, which is a real shame, and we've mentioned it here. Whereas Huntingdonshire benefited, in some ways, whereas Cambridgeshire benefits, there have been bits, and it's across the whole authority. Hopefully, with the new stuff that's coming through and the new framework for scrutiny, there will be improvements. I always live in hope. I'm always optimistic. Fingers crossed, and hopefully we can really push some good stuff through. The disappointing thing is, as we were saying just earlier this evening, is that the next scrutiny was cancelled. And from my view, having come to this one, the lack of what we were scrutinising, because actually all it was a paper on how scrutiny should work, as opposed to scrutinising actual stuff, wasn't it, from there. But fingers crossed, we don't have another one cancelled, and let's move on.
Do we have any questions?
Sorry. Sorry, Chair.
It's quite all right. Nope. Thank you very much. Finally, in this section, Councillor Corney was due to provide an update of activities on the Audit and Governance Committee. So I'll just very briefly hand over to him.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Unfortunately, I'd put my apologies in for Friday's meeting, and Councillor Patel, who's my substitute, was booked in to attend on my behalf. It was about 1 o'clock Thursday afternoon. Councillor Patel rang me up to say that she'd just tested positive for COVID and was doing the responsible thing and staying at home. But by which time it was unfortunately too late for me to change where I was to be there. But minutes are yet to be produced, so I can't really give much of an update. The only comment I'd like to add, though, is it is quite nice to hear, and I feel Councillor Conboy's pain, because that 1,000-page agenda was pretty much what was in my last update from the last meeting, all the things that we discussed at Audit and Governance, and I'd pretty much read every page of that 1,000-page agenda as well. So, yeah, thank you.
Thank you very much. Moving on to item 13, outcomes from committees and panels. This is your opportunity to raise any issues or ask questions arising from recent meetings of the Council's committees and panels. Are there any questions arising? No? I will then move on. Item 14, committees and panels. Can I invite group leaders to report on any variations to the membership of committees and panels if necessary? Councillor Conboy. Councillor Gray. Thank you very much. That brings us to the end of our agenda this evening. Can I thank you all for your attendance and everybody's contributions this evening. The meeting is now closed.